From Brendan O'Neill, published in Zero Hedge, we are witnessing the death rattle of the resistance. Remember when the phrase "the resistance" would conjure up visions of sexy French youths in berets battling actual Nazis? Now all it brings to mind is aging dullards in pink suits holding up signs saying, "This is not normal," while sporting the most turbo-smug look on their faces. It is that incredibly... This looks like Karen from HR. This looks like someone who would have you written up or even sacked at work because you didn't say hello to someone one day. Or you didn't say hello to her and bow and grovel and scrape at her feet. As US President Donald Trump spoke to a joint session of Congress, across the aisle the resistance was stirring, gushed The Guardian's DC reporter. His piece was illustrated with a photo of some congresswoman in pearls and a balding Democrat looking aghast as Trump talked. Seriously, if this is the resistance, the world's tyrants can rest easy. This week's Democrat fight back and resistance to Trump's rhetoric, journalists are literally calling it that, was next-level cringe. It occurred during Trump's 100-minute speech, the longest Congress talk in 60 years. As Trump bashed Joe Biden and bigged up Elon Musk, the Dems came over all suissante retard. Fury coursed through their ranks. Then the revolt started. The squad's Rashida Tlaib held up a scrawled sign saying, "That's a lie." Democrat Representative Al Green shook his cane and pointed his finger and cried, "You have no mandate to cut Medicaid." Oh, how the regime must have quaked at the sight of this revolution. The way some hacks are talking about this tantrum masquerading as a protest, you'd think it was a modern-day storming of the Bastille. The dim, stirring acts of rebellion have given hope to the resistance and sent a message to the world, said The Guardian. Nurse! Even leftists who have been disappointed with the Democrat establishment seem to get a moral kick from this political pantomime. So far, the resistance to the Trumpist tyranny has been splintered. But now we know it's getting better, fond Vox. Perhaps, it said, we'll soon see the aggressive resistance we really need. Can these people hear themselves talk? Overpaid politicians holding up mass-produced black placards with hackneyed complaints like false and liar. That is not the resistance. They're just the establishment cosplaying as campus radicals for likes and headlines. In one especially squirming scene, some Democrats remove their outer business wear to reveal black T-shirts with the word "resist" in bold white letters. Their delusions of radicalism are off the scale. Resistance is when young Iranian women rip up their hijabs or Kurdish revolutionaries fight the neo-fascists of ISIS, not when politicians on $174,000 a year put on a T-shirt their stressed-out intern ordered from some hip printer on 7th Street. This was not an uprising, it was an orgy of vanity. The Democrat benches were a sea of self-satisfaction. The face of every member of this resistance was etched with pride as they held up their stupid signs mocking Musk or branding Trump a liar. Oh, how original. The revolting Dems have shown the world what they are against. Now they need to show us what they are for, said The Guardian. But we can tell you what they're for. Themselves. They have co-opted the paraphernalia of protest to make a garish display of their own virtue. It's all just performative. Performative acts of narcissism, making it all about themselves. They don't really care. They just want the money and the power. There was rank hypocrisy, too. Some of the Democratic congresswomen sported pink suits to signal their fury with Trump's sexist policies that negatively impact women. Hold on, Didn't the Dems just torpedo a Republican bill that would have forbidden blokes, trans women, from taking part in women's sport? Literally the day before the Democrats brought a wave of pink to Congress, they shot down a bill that would have preserved the liberty and dignity of women and girls who just want to play sport without some hulking fella pushing them around. Honestly, Trump is Betty Friedan reincarnate in comparison with these woke wreckers of women's rights. Rarely has the gulf between the elite's virtue signaling and its real-world destructive behavior been so starkly illustrated. These congresswomen signed the death warrant of female sport one day and then swan around in pink the next to show what feminist bravehearts they are. These are incalculable levels of cant. If you think we're going to take lectures on women's rights from a political class that will happily sacrifice a girl's right to sport in order to placate their own Oberlin-attending offspring, you've got another thing coming. This preening display exposed the truth about the resistance. It was always the establishment larping as rebels, shamelessly plundering the history and the style of protest to add a gloss of legitimacy to their pursuit of their own class interest in the populist era. From those coastal movers and shakers who wore pink pussy hats to the Ivy League radicals who shouted Nazi every time they heard the name Trump, this was the elite mourning its waning cultural power, not a revolt against the man. The resistance is the man. We knew that 8 years ago when Stylist magazine gushed that Hillary Clinton had joined the resistance. I mean, come on. The smug wailing in Congress sounded to me like the death rattle of the resistance. These were the last gasps of the ancien regime, at least one would hope. At some point, they're going to have to fess up to the fact that the real rebels in America are those tens of millions of working people who voted for the overthrow of the old politics, not the pampered muppets defending that old politics. Can we have the word resistance back now, please? It's too important to let it be stolen by a knackered old ruling class that has the gall to disguise its ruthless self-interest as glorious rebellion. You see what we mean? You see what I mean when I refer to a lot of this as just AstroTurf? And really, so much of it was just bought and paid for. Something else from Zero Hedge, AstroTurf activism, how the US government and NGOs created gay pride from thin air. Growing up in America through the 80s and 90s, there was a general sense of live and let live among Gen X and Gen Y that truly defined the era and our notions of what a society should look like. We all knew gay people were a permanent fixture in society. For the most part, nobody bothered them, and they kept their gayness to themselves and far away from children. And frankly, that was working just fine. There were some protests and marches, but the only individual right straight people had that they did not was the right to legal marriage. Most people figured that once that changed, there wouldn't be anything left to protest. What we didn't understand at the time was that the seemingly harmless rise of gay pride in the 90s and early 2000s would become a primer for the woke madness that spread like wildfire from 2014 onward. As we now know, a lot of that insanity was rooted in programs funded through the US government. Pyon Lee, thank you for redeeming Not First. Also, hello. And thank you for the hydrate. Take another sip of water. And for the stretch, give me the full care package, I see. Ah. It is important to keep in mind, however, that the government is a tool, not the hand holding the tool. Elitist interests through NGOs and think tanks like the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation were the real impetus for the creation of the woke movement. They spent decades building the revolving door dynamic that cycled taxpayer cash through agencies like USAID and into the pockets of NGOs. As always, yes indeed. How are you doing, Pyon Lee? How are you? In other words, it's a mistake to think of the federal government as a mastermind. Remember, the government and the politicians within it are paid or blackmailed by wealthy globalists to support legislation that funds and empowers globalist projects. The international spread of queer activism or pride activism has been the goal of elites since the days of the Kinsey Institute, which was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and became the source for the invasion of LGBT ideology into modern academia starting in 1947. The Rockefeller Foundation still brags to this day about funding the rise of the sexual revolution and the notion of non-binary sexuality. Doing okay, you sir? I'm doing all right. I'm glad it's the weekend, you know? The transgender movement is largely tied to the intellectually dishonest and disturbed studies of John Money, conducted in the 1950s and 1960s. His experiments were bankrolled through the Johns Hopkins School, which was founded and largely funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. Once these ideologies, posing as social science, infected the halls of higher academia, students were turned into adherents of the cult. They then spread like a plague into politics and federal bureaucracy. They would go on to grow the unaccountable bureaucratic system that now cycles taxpayer cash from federal agencies into the coffers of NGOs. The great scam was set in motion, using American money to fund the demise of Western civilization. A large part of this agenda relies on the mafia-like enforcement of LGBT normalization in every facet of society, even in public schools where teachers now hang pride flags and expose children to gender-fluid theories with no basis in scientific fact. Hinataki, welcome in. Hello, hello. How are you? On the international front, a little-known agency called USAID was launched in 1961 for the purposes of providing material support to foreign populations in dire need and to combat the threat of communism. However, from the 1990s onward, the organization was increasingly involved in leftist propaganda with a specific interest in DEI. The apparatus that was built to stop communism was retooled to promote communism. Fast forward to the 2020s, what we have today is a hostile takeover, a government and NGO-funded color revolution that desires to annihilate Western values, Christian morals, and the general American regard for freedom of speech and freedom of thought. The woke movement is not just cultural Marxism, that's part of it. It's a massively well-funded ideological machine, a new religion of sorts that seeks to wipe out the fundamental principles that hold our society together. Good, how are you? Doing all right, doing all right. We're just sort of wrapping up the news here before we move on to our video reacts, our gourmet video segment. For the Western world, the pendulum swings from left to right, but noticeably more and more to the left and less to the right over time. Some call this the Overton window. In other words, conservative and traditionalist ideas and values that were acceptable 20 years ago are slowly and incrementally suffocated by artificial social and legal pressures until they're no longer present in the next generation. The woke ideas and values the establishment wants the public to adopt are promoted widely, but this requires extensive monetary backing. Social engineering campaigns are expensive, and they take many years to achieve results. With the revelations surrounding USAID and at least a dozen other institutions, it appears the agency was a key driver behind the rapid spread of DEI into every corner of our nation, not to mention many other nations. Their LGBT operations were particularly interesting, and I would assert that it was USAID that specifically injected the woke cultism into the public school system. I mean, sounds about right to me. They were the organization that encouraged school officials and teachers to indoctrinate children with woke ethics and transgender politics, and they also actively encouraged teachers to hide these activities from parents. One document that outlines the basic agenda is USAID's integrating LGBTQI+ considerations into education programming. The PDF was drafted and provided to field employees and workers in their Inclusive Development Hub and Center for Education. It explains how to inject DEI and LGBT propaganda into various public education institutions, using teachers and school officials as advocates. Researching back through some of USAID's activities from 2014 onward, there was a clear spike in funding surrounding LGBT programs for teachers and administrators. Because of the recent shutdown and audits, you have to use the Wayback Machine website to view a lot of this stuff, but it's still there, the document stating, quote, "The purpose of this document is to support USAID staff in working in the education sector to integrate lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer and intersex considerations into programming and across the program cycle." USAID's mission statement uses the same justification as most DEI promoters. They claim educational environments around the world are not safe for LGBT students and teachers, which is a lie. They always have been safe. They've just got more important things to focus on besides your sexuality. Like, I don't know, teaching you how to read, how to write, how to do maths. But their solution is to use overwhelming funding power to incentivize or bribe governments and educational institutions to inject gay propaganda into the curriculum. That is to say, they sought to evangelize education organizations with a woke belief system in the name of saving lives. The USAID head Samantha Power directly links the wokeification of culture to the fight for democracy. Registered trademark, copyright, all rights reserved. Creating a progressive crusade, meaning the elites frame LGBT indoctrination as an existential imperative to save the planet. Yes, the entire planet is doomed if we don't flood classrooms with LGBT indoctrination every second of every minute of every hour of every day. Never mind actually teaching people to read, teaching young students to read, write, and do sums. No. Let's instead talk about how one person is feeling a bit like how a boy is suddenly feeling like a girl today, or a girl is feeling like a boy today. Let's talk about sexuality. Most of the time with children who don't even understand what sexuality is and have not gone through puberty. Reminds us a bit of the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, aliens slowly, strategically taking over the world by hijacking each person and absorbing them into the collective. You might think it's a paranoid exaggeration to claim that USAID wanted to turn everyone gay, but you would be wrong. Consider for a moment the prevailing argument in favor of gays in the 1990s. They were born that way, they can't change it, just like a person can't change their ethnicity, so leave them alone. Okay, reasonable enough. What's the prevailing argument now? The same argument presented within USAID's own documentation. Gender and sexuality are completely fluid, and any person, including children ages 3 to 5, can change their preferences at any moment for any reason. Probably for even no reason whatsoever. Straight people only exist because they're forced to be that way through social constructs. Yes, I apparently like women, but only because it's a social construct. It couldn't be that it's a natural, biological imperative for me to want to mate, therefore I would seek out a woman from which I could mate and have progeny. It couldn't be nature. No, not at all. That's all a social construct, don't you know? In other words, the gay movement now agrees with its old Christian adversaries that gayness is a personal lifestyle choice, not a permanent condition you are born with. When the movement for gay rights morphed into the Pride movement, the goal was no longer equal rights, but the erasure of biological and objective reality. As USAID notes, quote, "The development and realization of one's sexual orientation and gender identity is a process rather than a singular event. This implies that self-identification and sexual orientation and gender identity may change over time and may not be congruent, and young people may need varying levels of support, space, and attention during this process." I call bullshit on this. Maybe it's just because I'm getting older. This is just something that seems to be open to and rife with abuse by clever young people trying to get out of learning the fundamentals that they're supposed to be learning in school. Again, of reading, of writing, of doing maths. varying levels of support, space, and attention. That just sounds like infantilization. The longer I live, the more I realize that my parents and even my grandparents were right. They don't need coddling, they need a swift kick in the trousers. USAID has maintained a laser focus on schools, education, and children. They admit that they targeted 120 school principals in Kosovo for LGBT inclusion training. They sensitized educators in Honduras on LGBT inclusion. They developed university programs in Jamaica on LGBT discrimination, etc. In the United Kingdom, a group called Stonewall is warning it might have to shut down after losing funding funneled through USAID. Stonewall is notorious for targeting children with trans propaganda in schools and funding pride propaganda across the UK and in other countries. Yeah, I don't think that Stonewall's going to be missed. I think we just did the world a favour. The US just did the world a favour by cutting off the USAID funding. Therefore, Stonewall just going to wither on the vine. That does not sound like a bad thing at all. Not only did USAID, along with other agencies and NGOs, invade schools with LGBT cultism, polling indicates they've been rather successful. Various public surveys show that the Gen Z, the most targeted generation, identifies as LGBT at a rate of 7% to 28%, depending on which poll you look at. Those numbers are an absolute load of bollocks. These are people who have been gaslit and propagandized. A generational increase from 2%, which is probably a far more accurate number, to 28% is scientifically impossible. It can only be accomplished through social engineering. It is not that these kids are actually gay. It is not that it is now more acceptable to be open about it. Polls were always anonymous anyway. It's not even that being gay is considered trendy for Gen Z. However, it should be said, it is considered quite trendy for Gen Z, for millennials, for all of the younger generations. Rather, they have been brainwashed to believe that being straight is a form of social oppression. And in a way, straight people are socially oppressed, just not in the way that they're talking here. They are being taught by USAID and NGO-funded programming to accept gender relativism as socially conscious and morally superior. They will never be gender fluid or feel attraction to the same sex, but they want to be on the right side of history. They want to be at the cool kids table. They want to be accepted by the cool kids. So they will identify as LGBT to feel like they are part of the cool kids crowd, that they are good people. Identifying as gay is not about sexual preference, it is performative virtue signaling. One can theorize about the deeper motives behind USAID's efforts. There's a theory that the Pride movement is designed to reduce population growth for the sake of reaching net zero carbon goals. Because gays usually don't have children, trans kids are often sterilized by hormone therapy. Yeah, I can believe that as well. Kinda sounds like we're trying to kill two birds with one stone here. Then there's the theory that Pride is a precursor to the normalization of child grooming and the legalization of pedophiles as a marginalized group. The globalist Epstein Island crowd would love that. I mean, we saw the succession. We've seen the succession over the years. Going from we just want to be left alone to we want to be able to marry to bake the cake bigot to gender is a concept and being straight is social oppression to, yeah, you started seeing voices coming up about minor attracted persons and talk of legalizing pedophilia. Reptane, welcome in. They took the hand and are now dragging the arm. Yeah. We gave them an inch, they're taking a mile. It's a big reason why a lot of gay people oppose the trans agenda. They don't want to be associated with the obvious groomer undertones of transgender activism. And let's not forget about the connection between LGBT indoctrination and progressive political organizations looking to create a permanent voting bloc. Leftist political parties use social pressure to trap marginalized groups in voter plantations. You are not allowed to be gay and vote against the Democrats, for example. If you do, you are considered a traitor and a heretic. And honestly, it's just so bloody predictable. Someone who is loud and open and vocal about their sexuality, being gender fluid, or having their pronouns listed somewhere. It's like the meme of... I think there's a meme one time of all of these overweight Latino activists and other leftist motley crew types. And the meme simply said, let me guess, Trump is not your president. It's all just so bloody predictable. And let's not forget what Biden said when running for election. I think, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. Yeah, I seem to recall him saying something like that. And in a way, Obama said the same thing during the Hedis campaign. We know how that turned out. The evidence supports all of these to some degree. The author's personal theory is that pride and the woke movement in general are precursors to a new secularist religion of self-worship and the worship of government. A globalist theology in which the greatest virtue is to deny objective reality and embrace relativism in everything from biological sex to moral compass. Might not be too far off the mark here. A lot of these people, they are not Christians, they are not people of faith, they do not believe in God. Or if they say they do, they engage in so many heresies and apostasies that we might as well just call them the faithless. That they simply are not fit to carry the moniker of Christian, or of whatever faith they happen to have. Was there ever a real pride movement? Was it all just establishment-financed astroturf from the very beginning? It sure looks that way. Yeah. I would have to say a lot of this was, in the most literal sense, a gay op. But so much of this was just fake and gay. As Doge cuts continue to run their course, and many of these agencies and NGOs are eventually defunded, I predict we'll see a rapid decline in younger people identifying as LGBT. I think we're already starting to see that. I can't put a number on it. I can only tell you what I'm seeing. And yeah, young people, especially young men, they want to get married. They want to settle down and have babies. They want to find themselves a good partner, a good wife. And more young women are starting to wake up to the lie that is feminism and say, yeah, you know what? I think I just want to be a housewife. I just want to be a wife and mum. And just leave it at that. So we're already starting to see this, I think. At least anecdotally. Also predicting that most of the Pride Parade activity seen every June will fade and that trans activism will mostly vanish outside of a handful of crazies. Oh yeah, there's going to be some hangers-on. That much is true. The Pride movement was never grassroots. It was a fabrication, an illusion conjured into existence through the sheer power of government cash and NGO manipulation. I mean, it sort of had to be. Normal people would not spend their resources and their money on this sort of thing. That's really what's got them so upset and so scared. Is that the gravy train has, in large part, come to an end. Party's over. It certainly looks like this is the way the direction is going, but ultimately we can only pray that all of this is looked upon as a short blip on the radar of human history. And that future generations look back at this and just ask, what the bloody hell were they thinking? Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. If you have any thoughts, questions, or ideas for future videos, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. You can also follow me on Twitter @LordRexworth for more updates and behind-the-scenes content. And if you want to support the channel, check out my Coffee or Throne pages. Links are in the description. Finally, be sure to visit LordRexworth.com and follow me across all platforms. That's LordRexworth.com. Until next time, I wish you all the best, and God bless.